Welcome, everybody. Peter Diamandis here to talk again about this incredible world of supplements to enable you to live your most vibrant, vital life and to live long enough to intercept the incredible technologies coming our way. Again, I am a physician by training, not by practice. And also, I'm a co-founder of Lifeforce with Tony Robbins. And so full disclosure on that situation. I'm joined today by an incredible physician who's a key member of the Lifeforce team, Dr. Hector Lopez, head scientific and innovation advisor for Lifeforce, historically chief medical officer and co-founder of the Center for Applied Health Sciences, chief medical officer, and co-founder of the Supplement Safety Solutions organization. He's founded a number of companies and has been really discovering ingredients in the supplement space for the last 15 to 20 plus years. Hector, a pleasure to have you back here.
Thanks, Peter. Likewise.
You know, we spend a third of our life sleeping, if you're getting enough sleep. And, you know, when I was in medical school, I'm sure like yourself, I used to pride myself on how little sleep we get. You know, I used to have like this island of stability at 5.5 hours. If I could get that, I could function during the day. Today, I pride myself on how much sleep I can get. And so I'm shooting for, you know, a minimum of 7 hours. I'm targeting 8 hours. I've got my Aura ring. I'm experimenting with this Amazon product as well. You know, let's talk about a product in the Lifeforce arsenal called Peak Rest. That I'm excited to share, especially the formulation that you built. And again, as always, it's the incredible multimodal, you know, 360-degree view that you take on what you've been designing for us. So let's jump in. I'm going to listen and learn. What I'll say to everybody is this is a supplement that is a powder. That we'll talk about how you take it, what's included, and what the benefits are of it. Hector, over to you.
Excellent. Thanks, Peter. And yeah, much like yourself, I also used to wear that badge of honor, you know, that false pseudo badge of honor of trying to get by on, you know, 4.5 to 5.5 hours sleep. And like you, I've also made the transition over the last year. Or two. Probably should have started a little earlier, but we're making strides. In the interim, though, as both you and Tony mentioned to me, you know, it would be great to have a product that, if we could find a way to sort of prime or optimize our sleep, sort of like with Peak Rise, where we're sort of winning the morning and then winning the day. What if we could do something similarly and sort of win the evening, win sleep, right? Sleep enhance the normal architecture of sleep, which is necessary for us to go through all those phases, to go from very light sleep in the early phases, then hopefully going down into that deep, slow wave sleep for a substantial amount of the first half or so of your total time and duration that you're asleep. And then we start getting those cycles where the REM portion of the sleep starts increasing towards the end of the latter half of the total sleep cycle. So what we want to do here is much like in Peak Rise, where we wanted to optimize the neurochemistry of focus, energy, attention, productivity. Here we also want to optimize and prime the neurochemistry of sleep, really. And sleep, in terms of its physiology, its neuroscience, the neurochemistry behind it, it's fascinating what the central nervous system and really the entire body is able to do during sleep. It's really another example of the amazing engineering and orchestra that is the systems physiology that governs our body. And so what we want to do here is kind of lean into it. And we wanted to go beyond melatonin. And as you can see by the ingredient list on the right here, we definitely have a little more than just melatonin.
Yeah, and I'm excited to dive into each of these because you've opened my eyes about these. And I'd like everybody to understand the science behind each of these components because they're not They are very methodically orchestrated to create this product.
As you led with, really far too few of us are getting enough sleep. And so obviously we're all striving to get into that blue zone of that 7 to 8 hours, that sort of Goldilocks zone for sleep in order to help stave off so many age-related conditions and diseases.
And by the way, we're about to go into the formulation of peak rest, but let me just say a couple of things as benefit. We talk about in the book Lifeforce, which is the components that enable you to get that sleep. First and foremost, it's making sure you get to sleep on a consistent time frame. I wake up at the same time every day between 5:30 a.m. and 6 a.m., which means to get the 8 hours of sleep, I need to be in bed no later than 9:30. And so I can control when I go to sleep easier than when I wake up. The second thing is I take the room temperature down to 64 degrees at night. And that cool temperature actually facilitates sleep and deep sleep. I use a chili pad, a cooling blanket to get it down, and I have an amazing eye mask. I can't go to sleep without my eye mask. It's a Manta eye mask, and on the lifeforce.com website we have links to all these products that you can go to and get. But for those who have tried these things and getting a great night's sleep is still a challenge, there's peak rest, which I'd like to dive into. And I'll be curious along the way, if you sleep well already, is there an advantage for using peak rest in addition to shape your sleep? So if you don't mind answering that question for me as you're going through this.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, that's a great point. There are certainly going to be side benefits to some of these ingredients that we've incorporated into the formula beyond what it's going to do to get you to sleep more efficiently with higher quality, et cetera, beyond sleep, if you will, as side benefits. So the first main ingredient that we've anchored our product to here is an amino acid. It's actually one of the most basic amino acids, as you can see by the structure here. It's glycine. And it's not D-glycine or L-glycine because it's such a simple molecule. There's actually no what we call in chemistry, there's no chirality to this amino acid. So it's just glycine. But glycine is a really fascinating amino acid. It's incredibly safe. Tolerable upper limits of glycine as a single amino acid are in the multi-gram amounts as a GRAS substance, meaning generally recognized as safe, and a high degree of certainty of causing no harm if taken for essentially a lifetime at these doses. So one of the studies that was fascinating was they took 15 females, looked at 3 grams of glycine versus placebo, and they used these standardized questionnaires, the St. Mary's Hospital Sleep Questionnaire, and one which probably you'd be interested in is the Space Aeromedicine Fatigue Questionnaire. And glycine relative to placebo in this cohort of females in a crossover, which, by the way, when we run clinical trials at CHS, we love the model. We love a crossover model when you can do it, when you have enough time to do it.
Yeah, and by the way, to explain a crossover model, half the group is getting A, half the group is getting B. You see the effects, and then you stop and you switch it. So it really does show, and again, when it's possible in a trial. I love crossover trials as well. They're the highest level science you can do.
Absolutely, everyone's their own control, right? So it's fantastic. Yeah. And in this case, they did show statistically significant improvements in fatigue, and I'm putting these in quotes because this is what some of the questionnaire domains, the output of the questionnaire domains: fatigue, liveliness, pep or peppiness, clear-headedness, and feeling refreshed after waking up from sleep. So I think most people who struggled with sleep, when I was in clinical practice, patients that would struggle with sleep, they would kill to be able to get this kind of a response, when they're struggling to find something to help, whether it's pharmaceutical or non-pharmaceutical intervention.
Amazing. And how much glycine is in the product?
We have the full 3 grams.
You do? Okay, amazing.
So we have a full 3 grams per serving of glycine. One of the nice things about glycine and formulating with it for in a powder is organoleptically, which means the senses, like what you smell or taste or feel, texture. It's very easy to work with because it's got a very mild, neutral, slightly sweet flavor already. So it's part of why I think some consumers already and members of Lifeforce are saying they love the flavor profile. So another study, this one was in both men and women. It was 6 women, 5 men, another 3 gram dose versus placebo, and another crossover study. So they took, A versus B, washed them out, and then the groups switched. And this one was really fascinating because here it's a more objective, quantitative analysis or assessment of how they slept. They actually used PSG, or polysomnograph testing, where all the subjects were hooked up throughout the entire evening, throughout the night while they were sleeping. And you could see improvements on actual sleep latency, onset latency, and the time that it took them to get into that slow wave deep sleep stage was actually reduced when they took the glycine versus when they took the placebo.
Amazing.
So we're able to get people into that deep sleep without changing the architecture of sleep, which is very important. I'm sure if we talk to Matt Walker, right? Well, obviously you guys interviewed for the book. Dr. Walker, I'm sure would agree. You don't want something that's going to improve one particular aspect of sleep, like just REM sleep or just slow wave sleep, if it's going to interfere with the normal orchestrated architecture of all those cycles that you need to go through sleep.
Yeah, we have a great chapter on sleep that really focuses on Dr. Walker's work. He wrote a fantastic book, Why We Sleep. I love that book and commend it to everybody.
Yeah, it's a fascinating read. Yeah, and then there were even subjective measures. So they combined objective, quantitative measures to subjective measures in addition to the EEGs. And they saw that these subjects that were on the glycine had improved awakening in the morning. They felt like they popped up out of bed feeling more refreshed, and they felt like their sleep quality was improved.
Nice.
Yeah. So other things that 3 grams of glycine at this dose have been shown to do is not only improve daytime sleepiness, so decreasing overall daytime sleepiness throughout the day the following day, but improving measures of fatigue and psychomotor vigilance when you sleep deprive people. So this was a study where they took a cohort of subjects. They intentionally reduced their sleep by, I believe it was about 30%, 30 or 40%. So they intentionally had them get only 5 hours of sleep for about a week. And then they looked at the difference between placebo and glycine. Those on glycine had less daytime sleepiness and fatigue, and they had improved psychomotor vigilance when they tested them on various digital batteries.
What's not to like?
Right, right. And in terms of how it works, it actually reduces core body temperature, which is fascinating. And you talked about how important that is, obviously. It modulates these important receptors in the brain that help calm the brain down, inhibits NMDA from being overexcited or neuroexcitation. There are actually glycine receptors, and glycine is one of those amino acids that can make it across the blood-brain barrier. It even increases serotonin levels, so your ability to make more serotonin. And then some cool neuropeptides that are released from the an area in the brain called the suprachiasmatic nucleus behind the optic nerves, VIP and antidiuretic hormone. So really fascinating stuff with glycine. So the next ingredients that we anchored is we moved from glycine, which has its own sort of unique mechanism of action. And what we wanted to do is use, as you said before, multiple vectors and comprehensively to try to address sleep in as a comprehensive and versatile manner as possible. So with these ingredients, this is clock is the trade name. It's actually an extract of daylily and rosemary. So these are standardized for terpenes and some other saponins that are found in daylily and terpenes that are found in rosemary. And we also included another glucose-like molecule. It's almost a sugar. It's basically a sugar alcohol, but it's a helpful sugar alcohol known as inositol. Now, there are about 7 different isomers of inositol. We use one called myoinositol, which that's what the structure of this molecule is down here. And myoinositol also has shown some benefits. So with clock, getting back to clock up here, 2 randomized double-blind placebo-controlled trials. These were parallel design, so they were randomized into either placebo or clock from the beginning, and then they were followed prospectively, one for 6 weeks and another one for 2 weeks consecutively. And what they demonstrated was taking this product before bed in the evening improved daytime mood, alertness, energy, their perceived enthusiasm, and their feeling of being well rested upon rising again the next morning. And what was interesting is quantitatively and objectively, blood levels of a molecule known as BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic growth factor. Another one, this is a myokine called orexin, which is, it's almost like a hormone-like, cytokine-like compound released from muscle when muscle is exercised or contracted. And then increases in actual melatonin and acetylcholine as well. And so clock itself has been shown in preclinical models, not in humans. It's harder to do this in humans, but in preclinical models, in vitro as well as in animals, to increase the expression of these clock proteins that kind of control the circuit of what keeps you on a 24-hour circadian clock. It maintains your sleep-wake cycle, but it's also what gets disrupted with either social jet lag or actual jet lag when you cross time zones, right? So these are the clock genes, clock, BMAL, PER, and CRY, which might seem strange, but PER is period. Clock is obviously stands for the 24-hour clock. BMAL is also another acronym. So here what we're doing is going after both peripheral and central circadian clock by influencing these clock proteins, and also by increasing the levels of these helpful compounds that we know help improve the brain. BDNF is neuroprotective to the brain, helps with neurogenesis. Orexin is very good for the metabolism, liver, insulin sensitivity, etc. So again, benefits beyond just, oh, I'm sleeping better. And inositol has got multiple studies supporting its benefits for global sleep quality and sleep duration. Using this is an instrument we've used in our lab. It's called the Pittsburgh Sleep Quality Index. It's very reliable. It's been used in many different patient populations, many different cohorts of individuals and different designs. In this case, they actually used it in pregnant women in one of these studies from 14 to 24 weeks of gestational age. So if there's ever any question about whether inositol is safe to consume or not, you can imagine how far on the generally recognized as safe inositol is if we're able to get IRB approval to get it to give it to pregnant women.
Sure.
And they actually showed improved measures of daytime attention, decreased anxiety, so improved mood, relaxation, a calm mind. These are claims we can make as opposed to making drug or disease claims, of course, because we're using a dietary supplement that's not FDA approved for a drug or disease indication. We've got a few others here. So we've got Xylaria. Xylaria is a brand name for an extract that's derived from a fungus that was used in traditional Chinese medicine. It looks pretty. It's actually the Latin binomial name is the nomenclature is Xylaria with an X, nigripes or nigripes, and it actually looks like a hand, and like these finger projections are coming out of the earth. That's what the fungus looks like. So what they do is they take the mycelium underneath the fruiting body, and they're able to extract it, for it actually contains preformed GABA. GABA is an amino acid that's also a neurotransmitter found in the brain. It stands for gamma aminobutyric acid. And it also has some other amino acids and minerals. It's been used for over 1,000 years in TCM. And when you look at some of the preclinical models, it shows that you can actually see GABAergic signaling go up, and you see generally a decrease in overall brainwave activity, which is really what GABA's role is, right? It's a general inhibitory amino acid, whereas you have a couple of other mostly excitatory amino acids like glutamate or norepinephrine, et cetera. So here it decreased essentially brainwave activity that would be associated with anxiety, overstimulation. And they also have human data that you can't really leverage it per se in dietary supplements, because it was used in an epilepsy human population with that had a diagnosis of epilepsy. But in those subjects, in those patients, it improved relaxation, sleep latency, and sleep quality. And they're actually embarking and commissioning another human clinical trial, not with us, but with another academic research group here this year. So we have xylaria that sort of, now you see we hit glycine, which has its own mechanisms. We hit clock and inositol, which have their own mechanisms, and also may improve some daytime properties. And here now we're going into some of the other important vectors of sleep, which is the real core neurotransmitters of what allows us to get to sleep and stay asleep longer, like GABA. And now we'll talk about serotonin as well. So Venetron is another ingredient that we incorporated here, again, at the clinical dose. And it has mechanistic data showing that it also activates GABA, but it also does something else that's similar to, are you familiar with St. John's wort?
I've heard of it.
Yeah.
What is it?
So it's a botanical that's been studied clinically, actually, to have serotonergic antidepressant like effects. And this particular botanical, this Apocynum venetum, the Apocynum venetum actually also has an ability to do something similar to St. John's wort, in that it also activates 5-HTP1A receptors, but it does it in a way that does not interfere with other drugs for there to potentially. One of the problems with St. John's wort is there was drug-nutrient interactions there. So if someone was taking St. John's wort, it would also inhibit one of the enzymes, the cytochrome P450 enzymes. I mentioned it here, the CYP3A. And so with this particular product, you don't have to worry about drug-nutrient interactions, but yet you still get the benefits of sort of tickling the serotonin system without the downfall and the drawbacks.
Amazing.
And then this one is supported by 4 human clinical trials at the dose that we use, 50 milligrams, demonstrating not only improved sleep, but also improved mood, late night sleep duration, which is basically the issue that many experience, where they wake up, they pop up at like 2 or 3 a.m. in the middle of the night. They're not quite finished with their, with their restful, restorative sleep. And this actually helps to prevent that. So it's a great ingredient.
Awesome. One more ingredient on this page.
Yeah. So the other one here that is probably many of your listeners have heard of is L-theanine. So L-theanine is what we know is the most common amino acid found in tea. It's found in green tea especially. And it also has the ability to influence GABA, as well as some other neurotransmitters as well. It actually influences GABA, as well as a little bit of dopamine and a little bit of acetylcholine as well, for sort of a calmed, relaxed state of mind. So what we're trying to do here is, if people begin to ruminate before they get to bed, and that's something that if they're perseverating, keeps them awake, then we're trying to address that here as well. So moving on to another mechanism, another vector that we're sort of addressing sleep with.
Please.
This ingredient, it's a branded ingredient called citronol. And the reason we're using citronol in this particular case is it was originally developed to help with lipid metabolism and improve blood lipid profile. So it can help with, it's been shown in humans to decrease total cholesterol, LDL, triglycerides.
Something which is good for all of us.
Right, yeah, so it's a nice side benefit. But in this case, the reason I use this ingredient is because the active flavones in it, they're a unique type of flavone and polyphenol. It's a polymethoxylated flavone. I didn't bother to show you the structure here, but chemically, but it's a unique flavone, and because of its unique chemical structure, it's been shown to also influence the circadian clock gene and circadian gene proteins that we talked about before, like PER, CRY, BMAL, clock, reverb. These are all transcription factors and circadian proteins that help to regulate and make sure that our central clock in our brain is in sync with our peripheral clock of all our other organ systems, such as our liver, as you can see here, the lung, the immune system, the kidney, the heart, skeletal muscle, everything. All of our peripheral cells, each cell has their own little clock that's also ticking away, and it's ebbing and flowing based on the expression of these circadian genes in an oscillatory fashion, and it generally follows about a 24-hour, it's technically like 23.8 or 23, it's about a 24-hour clock, you know? And so here what we did is we're trying to amplify the benefits of that circadian oscillation without interfering with it. And that's exactly what was shown in a cell culture model. It's still early days, it's still preclinical. But when you look at the potential risk with the potential benefit, even though this hasn't been shown in humans definitively yet.
But it has been shown to be safe in humans, to be clear about that.
Correct.
And have benefits from your lipid profile.
Yeah. So I'm trying to basically draw from an ingredient that we know is not going to cause harm, but can potentially benefit us here in our goal to try to amplify our total sleep quality and efficiency. And so in this case, what they did is it actually helped to lengthen the amplitude and the period of the circadian 24-hour circadian clock, and it even inhibited NLRP3 and interleukin-1 inflammatory upregulation from using endotoxin. So if they applied endotoxin to these animals and these cells in the animal models, they obviously saw a large upshoot in systemic inflammation and neuroinflammation. And by adding the polymethoxylated flavones, it protected these rodents from experiencing that neuroinflammation.
So benefits on top of benefits.
Exactly.
And then microactive melatonin. Tell me about that.
So melatonin is really what everyone thinks of, right? When you think of a sleep product. So, but we did some, of course, in Lifeforce fashion, we did something a little more sophisticated, right? In that most melatonin on the market, first of all, it tends to be dosed higher than you need it in order for it to influence your central sleep-wake cycles and your circadian rhythm. You really don't need 3 milligrams, 5 milligrams. As a matter of fact,
that's what everybody talks about taking. That's what you see on the nutraceutical shelf.
On the shelf. But actually, a very convincing human clinical data compared 0.1, 0.3, 3 milligrams, and 5 milligrams plus. And 0.3 milligrams gave us the most benefit where beyond point 0.3, you kind of plateaued. You didn't see any additional sleep benefits going beyond point 0.3. Now, there's this interesting, I guess, camp in biohacking of using very high doses of melatonin. I'm not sure if you've heard of people using it.
I haven't.
Yeah, they're using upwards of 10 to 30 to 50 milligrams. So we're talking about like, yeah, 50 to 100x what we're using here. And that's been shown to potentially help with people who have certain cancers, mitochondrial myopathies, real issues with chronic fatigue, very unique circumstances that conventional medicine doesn't seem to be providing much benefit for. That's where it's being used. So it's more of a bit of a fringe camp, but we just don't have human data to support it, right? It's very anecdotal. So here what we're doing is we're using the least amount, the minimal effective dose of a compound that is very beneficial. We certainly need melatonin. It does help protect mitochondria. It's neuroprotective. It even helps with metabolic health, with insulin and glycemic control. And what we did is we used an SR, which is sustained release. One of the interesting things that we get anecdotally in complaints from brands that we cover who have a standard melatonin immediate release product is they tend to wake up in the middle of the night and they're wondering, they went to sleep great, sleep onset was fantastic, and then they wake up wide awake 2 or 3 a.m. And part of the reason is because that immediate release melatonin, 90% of it gets dumped in the first hour and then 10% over the next 3 hours. Here, what you can see is with the microactive melatonin SR on this graph, you can see that what happens, it's sort of this multimodal sustained release where 40% you get a little bit of a lift in the initial hour, then another 50% over 5 hours, and then the last 10% over the final 2 hours to get you all the way to 7 hours. So you get a full, nice 7 hours of sustained release melatonin throughout the evening, throughout the night. And so combining that with the fact that we're only using that minimal effective dose of 0.3 milligrams really makes our approach pretty unique in that regard.
Amazing.
Yeah.
But that's not all. You've got a few more ingredients. Let's
Yeah.
touch on those briefly. It's extraordinary what you put together. So
Thank
creatine.
you. Yeah, so creatine. Yeah. So you're familiar with creatine, probably from in the sports nutrition space,
Sure.
of course. More than 1,000 studies have been conducted on creatine monohydrate, mostly. There have been other forms of creatine studied. I was part of this position stand that we published in 2017. It's kind of a tome on all things creatine, safety and efficacy in exercise, sport, and medicine, actually. And creatine is one of those phenomenal compounds that we're now seeing has broad application beyond what we know it already does for improving muscular exercise capacity, muscular power output, lean body mass increase or muscle size and strength adaptations to strength training. And it's one of those ingredients that now, to be honest, I feel like that's why I have it in the book as one of those top 5 to 10 ingredients to consider as we're getting older into midlife and beyond. Over the last 20 years, there's been more applications for the use of creatine in over 30 recognized diseases, everything from TBI and spinal cord injury. For example, when I was at Northwestern in Chicago, I did a pilot study comparing creatine to placebo in chronic stroke patients. We saw incredible benefits.
Amazing.
Both cognitively and with their gait, their ability to ambulate.
A superhero component.
It really is, yeah. So where this plays a role in sleep is that there have been about 3 studies published showing that in under conditions of sleep deprivation, so in the event that we do tip into that period where we're only getting 5 to 6 hours of sleep, it can still enhance cognitive performance, psychomotor vigilance, and decreases mental fatigue. So your ability to conduct even working memory improves as well. There's even cognitive performance benefits of creatine in the elderly that have recently been shown with just 3 to 5 grams per day. And so creatine here it's in the formula for a couple reasons. One is it can still add value as a sleep ingredient in those who may be sleep deprived or may not get enough to still get them through the following day. But it's also in sort of as you've seen a common theme, we're using the rest sleep product as a Trojan horse to get an ingredient that really everyone, men, women, young through old, could benefit from.
Amazing. I need to get my mom on this.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And then finally, we finish off with magnesium and sensural ashwagandha. So magnesium and sensual ashwagandha, both in here with magnesium. The data is not as strong when you use magnesium as an isolated supplement, mostly because the studies have probably been done using a poor bioavailable form like magnesium oxide, for example. But if you use something like magnesium bisglycinate, which we use in our product, it gets great bioavailability and it does cross the blood-brain barrier readily. It works on NMDA and GABA receptors. So again, we're hitting these multimodal targets, again, multiple vectors. This one trial, which I thought was interesting, is now we want to address what other factors could keep us from sleeping or resting deeply, and that is our HPA axis. So cortisol, for example, especially in this high supercharged stress, world we're living in. So, so magnesium's actually been shown to decrease cortisol. It also decreases serum renin and it increases melatonin. These are compounds that are part of the HPA axis we know can affect sleep onset. And then finally, the Sensoril branded version, because it's reliable and it's standardized for 10% with analytes and a couple of other bioactives like with a A. Human clinical trial with 130 subjects relative to placebo, statistical significant improvements in CRP, serum cortisol, which we said we wanted to go after.
Sure.
And even heart rate and blood pressure, as well as measures of anxiety on the Hamilton Anxiety Scale. And interestingly, even though cortisol came down, the other hormone of youth that came up was DHEA. So we're basically saying with adding Sensoril, we're allowing people to improve their biological response to daily stress and improving their mental well-being as well.
You know, Hector, this is an incredible orchestration of components that you put together. I mean, you're truly an orchestra conductor in this regard. And I sleep great, and so I haven't been using peak rest. I'm actually excited to try it for all the other secondary benefits and maybe even sharpening myself in the next day. So thank you for sharing this. I mean, really amazing. So this is a powder.
Yes.
And how do you typically take it? Is this something you sort of like mix with hot water or cold water?
Yeah, the flavor team. So the flavor team at the manufacturer basically put together a very unique sort of like honey lemon, honey lime flavor for this powder. It's only 10 grams, which is a couple of level teaspoons. And so the way most people are taking it is they're taking it at night, either with 4 to 6 ounces of water. So this way they're not drinking an enormous amount of water an hour before bed or whatnot. Or they're using it with their tea. If they're already taking some chamomile tea, for example, at night, or mint tea, you could actually just dissolve the powder in your tea. That's personally, when I use it, that's how I take it. So I'll use some mint tea, and then I'll throw a scoop of peak rest. Sometimes I'll even just do half a scoop because I sleep well generally as well. But sometimes I'll do half a scoop if I don't feel I need the full gestalt. So.
And your recommendation is an hour prior to sleep?
Yes, about an hour prior. We want to we want some time for some of these bioactives to make their way systemically into the plasma, into the serum, and be able to cross the blood-brain barrier. So.
Amazing. Again, pal, I mean, the depth of your knowledge is extraordinary. I just, your last 20, 30 years of your world and the work that you've done is prepared you to be able to put this together. And thank you. Thank you so much. Love this conversation on peak rest. Just
Awesome.
beautifully done.
Thank you.
Thank you, Hector.